The main reason why they should be motivated is because climate change mitigation policies introduce not only risk for society, but risk for investors. And to put it in very simple terms, if, as many people are saying, in the near future, you will see carbon pricing of one form or another being introduced, it will affect the bottom line of the carbon emitters, large companies that have stocks in your portfolio. And if it hits their bottom line, it will hit investor returns. So as a fund manager, you cannot just pretend this risk isn't there. It's a real risk. It's a rising risk. And just as, from a point of view of risk management, you need to pay attention to this risk and then ask what can you do to manage this risk. So again, I think here the answers are relatively straightforward from the point of view of financial analysis. The first place to start is you need to be able to measure what you hope to be able to manage. Measuring means concretely means you have to measure your carbon exposure, your carbon footprint. That is, the portfolio companies you're holding, what is their carbon footprint and how does that affect the carbon footprint of the entire portfolio? That's step one. You need to measure that. There are providers out there, a growing number of providers in increasing sophistication that offer measurements of carbon footprint or carbon intensity or stranded assets of various large companies. And you can now basically use those measures and aggregate them into your portfolio and say, my portfolio has this carbon exposure. That's like step one. Step two, you have to ask yourself, once you know what exposure you have on carbon, you have to ask yourself, am I getting a return, adequate return on the risk I carry with respect to holding this risk factor? To the extent that you're not getting an adequate return because carbon isn't yet adequately priced, and investors and financial analysts are not paying attention enough to this risk, you should try as much as possible, try and reduce your exposure. Now, the challenge is, of course, by reducing your exposure to carbon, you don't want to reduce at the same time your exposure to risks that are well priced, that you may want to hold. So the challenge is to reduce exposure to carbon without affecting your exposure to other risk factors that are adequately priced. And there are many different ways you can do this. But one interesting way that has emerged in recent years is the idea, very recently, I mean in the last year, is the idea of holding a decarbonized index, such as what MSCI has been proposing now is marketing. For example, for MSCI Europe, MSCI is proposing a low carbon leaders index for Europe, where the purpose of the index is to maintain the returns of MSCI Europe, i.e. minimize tracking error, while reducing the carbon footprint. And that's what it does. It's a service it's offered to index investors, and seems like one promising avenue for asset managers to do something about carbon risk and climate risk. They play, in my view, two very important roles. A first role is just a role of information sharing of what's out there, of strategies that particular funds have used that work well, others that work less well. Just the information sharing among all the fund managers, increasing number of fund managers who are taking climate risk seriously and trying to do something about it. So bringing them under one common platform where this information exchange can happen is a very important first role. The second important role is to be able to communicate to the broader financial markets world about this growing constituency that is committing to do something about reducing climate risk, and build. That's why it's a coalition. It becomes an interest group promoting a particular approach and playing its role as an interest group. So on both those fronts, it's a very important initiative.